Hi, welcome everybody to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf and I'm here to learn some facts with you today about our furry, scaly, or possibly even slimy friends, all while relaxing and sometimes going a little off topic. And this is what it is all about for me in terms of the learning experience. So you're gonna hear me say and a few more times than I would like. I'm still working on it, but I just want to give a quick shout out to you guys for listening. We have a bunch of new listeners to the podcast, so I'd like to welcome all of you. This is the show where I learn with you and relax with you at the same time. So there's a few different ways of how you can listen to the podcast. You can put on the podcast and just kind of, maybe it's late at night, maybe, it's in the middle of the day. Anytime that you just want to kind of relax, find a comfy seat, find a comfy chair, maybe a nice sofa, or maybe just even walking around, maybe you're at a park somewhere and you just wanted to listen to some animal facts. And that's what the show is all about. So, today we are going to be talking about the flamingo, okay? I know this is a favorite for a lot of people. It's a very distinct animal, very, very interesting. It has its own little things about it that make it super, it can be weird or it can be unique, and that's what the show is all about. Kind of going into some details about animals that make you go, "What? How is that? How is that a thing? Why did it evolve to be this way?" And everything has its purpose, and usually not all the time, but usually the traits that make these animals unique served some evolutionary purpose. They adapted it for some reason. Evolution selected it for a reason. So unless it didn't, that's how we get genetic mutations, but sometimes they prove to be advantageous anyway. But anyways, getting off topic here. So you guys are going to notice I go off topic sometimes. I usually like to equate maybe what animal we're going over with another animal, or maybe even humans, because human beings are animals too, guys. Don't forget, each and every one of us are animals, right? So let's get into the first fact. Actually, let me just say where I got my facts from. That's an important part of the show too. So I'm getting my facts from the Discover Wildlife page on the internet, so discoverwildlife.com, and Mental Floss. That's Mental Floss, I believe, .com as well. So if any of these animals strikes you, if you want to learn more, I always encourage that. If maybe the flamingo, or we've covered orangutans and gorillas and manatees and pandas. If any of these interest you, you can always go and research some more. Maybe watch some Netflix documentaries or something on YouTube. It's all up to you. But being proactive and learning, and you guys are being proactive because you're here listening with me. That's the best way to learn. And getting some kind of using that passion to learn is important. But let's get into it. So the first fact of the flamingo is that there are actually 6 distinct species of flamingo, but it actually takes a fairly trained eye to distinguish them, because when I imagine that these specific species here are just kind of the region that they happen to reside in. We're going to talk about what kind of regions they like, but because I've seen flamingos maybe 3 times in my lifetime. One time in Cuba, another time in the zoo, and the other time I forgot where I saw it. But I couldn't tell you what species of flamingo that was. I don't know what the specific differences are between each flamingo. There's some very small physical characteristic that differentiates them, but that is not something you have to worry about. If you see a flamingo, you're just gonna be like, wow, that's a flamingo, not about what distinct species of flamingo it is necessarily. So adult flamingos are 4 to 5 feet tall. So 4 to 5 feet tall, and they only weigh, okay, get this, guys, they only weigh about 4 to 8 pounds. So 4 to 5 feet tall and weighing between 4 and 8 pounds. So these are very, what's the opposite of dense? They just don't have a lot of body density. So if we look at a person, let's look at an individual, a human being that's 5 feet tall, for example. 5 feet tall, let's say, I think the average weight for someone that's 5 foot, maybe 100 to 120 pounds, somewhere in between there, a healthy weight. I believe about that. So with the same height, 5 feet, between a human and a flamingo, let's say 8 pounds flamingo to 110, 120 pound human being, right? Their body density is, our body density more than 10 times of theirs, is what it can seem like. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule for both species, for both humans and flamingos, but generally their body density is seriously low. And that is very important for the aspect of flight. Because when you have a bird that's very tall, in this case, like the flamingo, these are 4 to 5 foot tall birds, and birds generally aren't that tall. They don't have that kind of height. So having that lower body density helps for flight immensely for these pink guys here. Because as you can imagine, if it was a 5 foot tall, say like even like 50 pound bird, that would be incredibly difficult for the bird to be able to kind of do much. I actually wonder, just like the ostrich, right? Because the ostrich is a fairly tall bird, doesn't fly, it's a flightless bird, but it runs incredibly quickly. I'm just wondering how much actually the ostrich is. You know what? I'm not going to dig too deep into it because I would love to cover the ostrich, because the ostrich is a very unique bird in that sense. And I'm actually curious about what the weight is of ostriches now. But you know what? We're going to table that for now. So they tend to congregate in mudflats or lagoons. Okay, so lagoon, that reminds me of I love that word. It reminds me of SpongeBob. So flamingos tend to go to these areas where they can find that shallow kind of saltwater prey. And these habitats, as you can imagine, maybe mudflat or lagoon, these are actually very difficult areas for predators to kind of maneuver in quickly, because a lot of these predators, let's take for example, say a lot of the big cats, right? So like leopards or cougars or tigers or whatnot, they rely very much on having stable ground to be able to spring forward to catch prey. A lot of the time, how they like to sneak up in brush and then pounce. When you have shallow salt water and you have kind of muddy ground, it's incredibly hard to get a lot of power to drive and try to spring forward and catch maybe a flamingo or something. But also, not just that, this makes it very difficult for predators to sneak up on these guys, because when you have shallow water, if you've ever been on the beach before and you kind of ran along the shore, you know that it's very loud. If you run across the shore, you can hear it coming. Flamingos will be able to hear them coming from a mile away. So, even though tigers and other big cats and a lot of predators generally are sneaky, right? They can only do so much. So these are very good, whether they go there just for the shallow saltwater prey, if that's just what they've always done, or if that was more of a maybe they started going somewhere else but then realized that this is actually a super safe place and rich in terms of food for them. In terms of the history of that, I don't actually know. But flamingos, talking about them eating, they feed they kind of stomp their feet back and forth, so they stir up the mud with their feet, and then they'll actually go down, they'll reach down, and they'll scoop up a big beakful of mud and water. And these flamingos have an interesting kind of beak structure, because they are like a strainer almost. So their beaks are designed to strain animals from the mud and the water, So the muddy water kind of just runs out of the beak. And if you've ever seen when a flamingo is kind of feeding, how their head will kind of go upside down, and that's that straining process. So I like to think it's just funny to think of them as, 5 feet tall strainers, right? If you ever need to strain something, there's just a flamingo ready to go. So I think that's it's very unique for sure. So they have a beak that is specifically designed to strain out, animals from the mud. And whether that came before or after they, or if they've just always been in mud flats and lagoons, that they just kind of evolved to be that way, to be able to strain out mud and water. So these are the things that excite me, because I start asking all these questions, like, where evolutionarily did this happen? I don't think we go over kind of what they are close to, or where they evolved from specifically. No, I didn't get any facts for that. But that, what is not covered in the podcast, because this podcast is more of a kind of unique and sometimes basic kind of facts to help you relax, right? It's not too much going into 100% in depth about anything, about everything. So if these questions come up after the podcast, I'll search them up, because I'm curious, and I know you guys are curious too, because you're listening to the podcast. So anyways, flamingo's head upside down, they become a bird strainer. Okay, so let's talk about the different kinds of flamingos. Okay, the American flamingo is the only flamingo species that's native to North America, and now is rarely seen in the United States. United States has undergone plenty of changes over the few the couple decades that that this whole industrialization has been going on. So I mean, they don't really have a lot of mud flats or lagoons, maybe in certain places, but they're very rarely seen in the U.S. anymore. And the American flamingo is actually more brightly colored than the greater flamingo. So there's a greater flamingo, and that inhabits the coasts of Africa, Asia, and southern Europe as well. And although the greater flamingo is the most widespread species, so widespread, they cover the most amount of area, the most numerous is the lesser flamingo. So, when scientists kind of use these kind of classifications, or these names of animals where it's greater or lesser, it doesn't always mean what you think it means. So in this case, greater flamingo doesn't mean that it's 8 foot instead of 5 foot, or greater doesn't mean that there's the most amount of these flamingos. Greater in this case, right, is all about the context, that they're the most widespread, so they cover Africa, Asia, Southern Europe, while the lesser flamingo just doesn't cover as much area, but they have the most, or they have the most population, so the most numerous, right? So don't let those terms trick you sometimes, because they could be tricky. Little bit of a cool fact: flamingos have this weird, kind of odd gift of being able to detect rain. Flamingos in Africa rely on the life of freshwater and soda lakes, which they strain through those very weird bills that they have. Actually, I got something in my throat. I'm just going to take a quick sip of this tea here. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. But many of the lakes on which they depend on are what they call as ephemeral, which is prone to drying out almost completely. But on the parched coast of Namibia, greater flamingos appear to know when the rains are due, and usually in the dry Etosha pan that lies 500 kilometers away. So flamingos knowing when rain is due, when the rain is actually close to 500 kilometers away, it is very odd. This is a very odd kind of skill that they have, because it is too far away to see any kind of lightning or hear any thunder. It is possible, though, that flamingos are very sensitive to those very, very, very minuscule, fancy word for small, drops in barometric pressure that signal oncoming rainfall. So that's what I have written here. So let's break that down really quickly, okay? So from 500 meters, for 500 meters, 500 kilometers away. So for you guys that use miles, I'm not exactly sure what the conversion is. You know, it has to be maybe like 200 miles or something like that. So incredibly far away, they can sense rain. Okay, and how this is actually done is not entirely understood. It's referred to as kind of an enigma. The weather sense of these flamingos, very very odd. But just really quickly, I just want to explain a term really quickly when it says the birds are sensitive to minuscule drops in barometric pressure. Baro in its just that key word baro means. If you guys have ever taken maybe any kind of chemistry or physics or something like that, you'll see that word, the B word, barometric or barometer, or it's just a form of a pressure measuring or a unit really. Okay, so baro always is referring to pressure. So if you see that anywhere, that's what it means. And with rainfall that comes, there are drops in pressure. And if you've ever heard anybody say, "Oh, I always get headaches," around the time that it's about to rain, or some weird thing that they talk about, that rain must be coming, and for some reason it almost always does come. There are actually drops in pressure that sometimes people can claim that they feel, but in the case of flamingos, where they can feel it 500 kilometers away, that is an incredible skill. Very very odd, but I thought it was very interesting. Let's talk about flamingo mating. Okay. Males and females perform a spectacular courtship dance to attract a mate. So I always talk about how, I like to always equate these animals to human beings, but I'm very thankful that males and females in human kind of in human history, that there doesn't have to be a spectacular courtship dance, because I would be dead in the water for sure. I wish I could move like a flamingo. I would like to say flamingo is my spirit animal, but I don't think so. If it required me to do a spectacular courtship dance, yeah, I don't think my genes would be passed on. But once formed, the flamingo pair bonds are mostly monogamous. Okay, so they say mostly because recent research, the majority of birds are monogamous, or they are seen to be monogamous by each other, but actually they have been recorded as cheating on with their monogamous pairs. So in many birds, and that's why that they make the distinction that it's mostly monogamous, because sometimes they will go and they will actually cheat on each other. So it's like selective monogamy, a kind of, or I believe they use the term serial monogamy for a lot of birds, because while they do, if they were to catch the other bird with another bird, then I imagine that relationship is over. And I think I've seen a video of that before. But really interesting kind of a look into bird life, how it's mostly monogamous, but sometimes they go around with other flamingos or other birds. But I like that flamingos have their spectacular courtship dance. That's awesome. There should be some flamingos on, or they should have their own form of Dancing with the Stars there. The color pink. So flamingos are known for this very distinct, unique pink color, and it actually comes from what is called beta carotene, and that is present in crustaceans and plankton that flamingos tend to eat. So those are the main food sources there for wild flamingos. In the poor chance that a zoo neglects to actually feed a flamingo their proper diet, or if they're not given live shrimp, or they're given flamingo chow that doesn't have those carotenoid pigments, then their fur or their feathers rather, as a whole bird, they will turn white instead of pink. So if you see a white adult flamingo, that indicates that they're not actually getting the nutrition that they need, or so they can't find the shrimp, or they're being fed not enough of what they actually need. So, that color pink, beta carotene, don't have to remember that word. I sure as heck will forget it after the podcast is over, but I just think it's interesting. The color pink, beta carotene. But the feathers, talking about the colors of the feathers under their wings are actually black in color. So you can only really see this black coloration when they're flying, obviously, because then their wings are spread out and they're above you and you can see. So they have actually black underneath their wings. I actually haven't seen a flamingo fly before. I've only ever seen them kind of walking around on land or in shallow water. Maybe I should, you know what? I'm going to search up flamingos flying after the podcast, and I encourage you to do as well if you'd like. Flamingos flock in groups of up to several hundred birds. Okay, so they actually perform their mating displays together, like this flamenco. It's an interesting sort of dance, almost competition. It's not really a competition too much, but the different species and even different flocks of these birds will actually they'll switch it up. They'll put a little bit of a different spin on the dances. So there's actually individual mating dance moves for to kind of impress the females. So during these courtship dances, they'll make up their own moves. I don't know how much I have to pay to be a flamingo choreographer, but that's something that I should read up on. I love the fact that these animals come up with their own dance moves. It's very, very funny to me. I'm just trying to imagine a flamingo kind of doing a robot or figuring out what next dance move they're gonna do. Let's move on to some more facts here. I'm gonna move a little bit faster here because I got a few more facts to get through. I'm talking too much about flamingo dance moves. The male and the female of a mating pair, so after this courtship has been done and they've chosen their mates, they build a nest together, and they both actually sit on the egg while it incubates for about a month. So most often you'll see the female bird incubating, but in the case of flamingos, they like to double up. So both of them sit on the egg. And some flamingos, for these nests, sometimes they find it easier to steal a nest that's already been built. So the flamingos don't have to only worry about predators. They have to actually worry about other flamingos coming to take the nest that they built. So if they can find a way to conserve more energy and not build their own nest, they will try to go and take a nest for themselves. So, they're not very nice to each other in this sense that they will kind of take advantage if they can. But that's just that's survival in this case. And when a flamingo chick hatches, both of the parents take turns feeding it. The first thing is a special liquid baby food that they produce in their throats called, it's referred to as crop milk, and then it's regurgitated regular flamingo food as the chick grows up. And flamingo chicks are actually born with gray and white feathers, so they don't actually turn pink for about a year or two. And their beaks they're born with these straight kind of beaks, but as you've seen flamingos before, they have this curvature to their beaks, and that curvature actually happens as they mature, as they grow up. So they're not born with those very, very curvy beaks as maybe other birds are. I don't know, maybe toucans are born with that. I don't know. I'm just guessing. So they're born with gray and white feathers as opposed to that really pink color. And over time, with their diet, they'll establish that pink coloration from the beta carotene. There we go. I remember it. Look at me. And a variety of land predators will attempt to eat flamingos and their eggs, but because their nests are built on swampland or mudflats where they can actually, where they're much less prone to being snuck up on, the most common predators for flamingos are actually other birds. What other kinds of birds? I don't know specifically. If I was to guess other birds, they would have to be large birds, maybe like a falcon or like a hawk or something. Because remember, guys, these are only, flamingo, 4 to 8 pounds, right? 4 to 8 pounds. I'm sure a hawk would have absolutely no problem with a 4 to 8 pound a bird. because they're large animals, very strong. So their most common the most common predators for flamingos are other birds, not really too much of tigers or of any kind of other a big predator there. Flamingos are not endangered. They're actually classified as least concern, which means that their numbers are fairly stable. So that's great news, right? I feel like almost all the animals that we've talked about are actually endangered in some sense. But in the case of the flamingo, great news. They're doing just fine. So they're fairly stable. But whether they stay stable will actually depend on a number of things, and things like what happens to their habitats and where they breed. They need places to perform their little dances, right? So you can't take the stage away from dancers, and you can't take the breeding grounds away from flamingos, because they have dances to do. There is one related species, however, of flamingo that is said to be declining. And that is actually kind of a joke because it is the plastic lawn flamingo. So I'm sure you have all seen at one point in time, maybe in media, like movies or music videos or whatnot, or even just in your neighborhood, lawn flamingos are actually a very popular, or they were a very popular American cultural icon. In 1957, an artist named Don Featherstone, and I love that his last name is Featherstone. I think that there's no better man for the job to kind of introduce flamingos into popular culture like that. And in the 21st century, they are considered endangered. Guys, we're talking about plastic lawn flamingos. Okay, the actual flamingos are fine. But there's less and less of these plastic lawn flamingos all around. All around. And the effort actually is to revive this certain art form. In 2009, Madison, Wisconsin actually named the plastic pink flamingo the city's official bird. So I like that they have this kind of sense of humor. They're trying to bring back this cultural sort of icon from 1957 that was really popular. So they're trying to bring it back. But a little bit of humor there, but in the case of flamingos, they're not actually endangered. So good news. Just, as long as we don't take away their stage for their courtship dancing and their, and the robot and places for them to actually nest, right? Because these flamingos aren't actually very good at fighting back against big predators. Being 8 pounds, that's not much force you can put out. So let's keep flamingos stable, guys. And we've actually reached our last fact, and we're going to move on now to the final little factoid. And the final fact of the podcast is always to do with the name of the animal. So that's how I like to end the podcast. Kind of either a history of the name, where it came from. Maybe there's a funny story. And the best way to learn, I always say, is through stories, because I think stories provide so much meaning. And if you ever have trouble memorizing, turning stuff into a story just makes you kind of really retain the information a lot better, to me. So in the case of flamingos, the name flamingo comes from the Spanish word flamenco, which means fire, and that refers to the bright pink or sometimes kind of orangish color of the feathers. Very apt name for the flamingo. I think I've used that word 3 times the last time. Let's think of a new word. Not apt, appropriate or suiting name for the flamingo. Flamenco. These are firebirds, guys, not to be confused with phoenixes, the mythical kind of firebird. But the flamingo is almost as majestic, almost. So, guys, I very much hope you enjoyed this podcast. Again, I would like to thank you guys from the from the bottom of my heart here for tuning in, and I appreciate all you new listeners out there. Welcome to the Relax with Animal Facts family. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can send an email to relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and you can if there's any kind of inaccuracy to what I said or whatnot, I can always clarify it on the next podcast. So don't be afraid to shoot me an email, and it may be a segment that you'd like to see on the show that you'd find relaxing. Let me know, and I'll consider it. I'll read it. I'll respond, and again, thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, make sure to follow it or subscribe or whatever you'd like to do. And sharing is caring, guys. Maybe someone else wants to relax with animal facts. Maybe somebody else would like to know about flamingo courtship dances. So don't be afraid to share around. It helps the podcast, and maybe it helps that person, relax just a little more. So again, thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next podcast where we talk about, another animal. Thank you guys. Take care.